So obviously when performance review comes, you're hoping to get that positive review, you're hoping to be up for promotion or a raise, but what happens if you get a negative review? Let's talk a little bit about handling a poor performance review. So if you go in for your annual review and it's bad, the first thing that's important to do is that you reflect. Ultimately, your supervisor is still going to be your supervisor and you're going to continue to work for them unless this is the end of your career there. So it's really important that you listen to their feedback and you consider what they're saying. If at all possible, ask for specific examples. If they say things like, I feel like you usually don't care about projects, ask them if you can give them some examples of projects where you feel like you've dropped the ball. The more specific examples you get, the better you can really understand what were the things that caused your boss to have negative feelings towards you. It's really important that you avoid emotional responses. Emotional responses make it look like your annual review that's negative is more warranted. The more calm and optimistic you can be about receiving your negative performance review, the more you're going to be seen as a leader or someone that can move forward in positive ways in the company. Also, ask for questions. How can you change in the future? Future orientation is key here because your negative review is bad, so you want to talk about future orientation for how you can be more positive in the future. So see if you can get specific step-by-steps from your leader about how they want you to improve in future situations. When possible, create a plan and be a problem solver. Okay, apologize for what's happened in the past and move forward in ways where you're creating a plan and focusing on future that's going to be better. How can we create a plan so we don't have the situation again a year from now or 6 months from now? While they're giving you this negative review, it's going to be painful, but take notes. By taking notes, it shows that you care about the feedback that you're receiving, and it can be a really difficult time, but it can also help you to tune down your emotional responses. As much as possible, you want to keep that optimistic and calm attitude so that you're keeping a good attitude with a learner's perspective during your negative annual review. This makes it more likely that you're going to be able to pull out of it or maybe even overturn some of the negative feelings or perceptions that are towards you. Another thing is after you leave the annual review and it was bad, don't tell others about it. Right? Now, of course, you can go home and tell your spouse about it or your significant other about it, but don't tell your colleagues about it. Don't tell your supervisor about it because other people won't necessarily know that you received a bad review. And by telling them you received a bad review, you're coloring their perception of you as well. So it's really important that you stay quiet, especially at your workplace, about your negative annual review. In a performance review, it's really important that you don't do the following. Accuse your manager. Again, your manager is still your manager, whether or not they're being fair. So it's really important that you don't accuse them of negative things. This is just going to hype up or make them feel that their negative performance review towards you was warranted. Don't paint your manager as biased or unfair. It might be true, but pointing it out to them is probably not going to make the situation better. So even if it's true, keep the thoughts to yourself and try to keep that calm and collected persona. Don't criticize the manager's ability or character, right? Because again, the more you do this, the more defensive they're going to become, and they're still in a management position, so it's not going to make this better for you. Don't threaten them in any way, and don't compare yourself to others. Well, I still did better than this person over here. Again, they're talking about you specifically at this time, your specific performance evaluation. The calmer and more confident that you can be in the face of this, the more you can be future-oriented, the more you can move past this. The more you accuse your manager or start a fight, the worse off it's going to be because at the end of the day, they're still your manager, they're still your leader, they're still the one that's going to give you the review. It's also important you don't throw others under the bus because this makes you look bad, like you're not a team player. Again, it's making it look like you warranted the bad review even if you didn't. Again, if you do any of these things, if you accuse your manager, you paint them as biased, you criticize them directly, threaten them, compare yourself to others, and throw them under the bus, you've now earned the bad review even if you hadn't earned it originally. And I know you're thinking, but my performance review is unfair. I didn't do anything to warrant this bad review, and here I am receiving it. What do I do when I have this unfair performance review, when my boss thinks about me in ways that are unfair and don't reflect on the work that I've actually done? Well, one thing that's important is to know the culture. Some companies have a very critical review culture, which means everyone is receiving a critical review. Everyone is receiving a review that seems unfair. That's just the culture of the company, so it's important that you know that so that you can see, well, what's happening here is my boss is just trying to show their authority or show areas where I can improve. Also, it's important that you ask about the implications. What's the implication of a negative performance review? In some companies, honestly, they don't matter. They go in your file and no one ever reads them. So even if it's unfair, there's no use getting worked up about it because frankly, they don't have any implications. At other companies, they can be linked to promotion or they could be linked to raises. In that case, you may need to look at a new company. You also want to avoid emotional reactions. Again, the more emotional you are during the performance review, especially the negative performance review, the worse environment you're going to create in the performance review, and the less you're going to be seen as someone who should be promoted. So these reactions will typically only make it worse. So if there's any true parts in the negative review, make sure you acknowledge them. And as much as possible, you're going to try to stay that calm and collected self, even in the face of an unfair situation. See if you can create some future steps to get a better review in the future. So again, the more future-oriented you can be, the better you can be moving out of this negative review and hopefully in future years receiving a more fair review. Any rebuttals later on, either in writing or in the performance review, should be respectful, concrete, and well-written. So if you're going to write something that goes against what your boss gave you as a performance review, make sure you do it in a tone that's respectful, concrete, and well-written, so that they can see that you are articulate and that you are still calm and collected. And don't run to HR. Technically, human resources on paper exist for you to go to them if you have some kind of problem and you think that your boss is biased. But honestly, no good comes of this. What HR is going to do is potentially even tell your boss that you came to them, which is going to make your boss more upset with you because your boss now knows that you turned them into HR, and in the end, HR probably can't really do anything about it. So even though the HR might feel like they're there as your buddies to listen to you about your negative performance review to turn in your boss, in the end, I promise you, no good will come of it. It's just best to let it go and keep it to yourself. Go home and complain to your friends outside the company. And don't refuse to sign the review. Usually you have to sign a performance review. That's actually just acknowledging that you've read or received the review. If you refuse to sign the review because it's negative, that could actually lead to your termination or disqualify you from unemployment because you've been fired for reasons because you didn't fulfill your basic job function. So if you got actually fired, you could get unemployment, but if you got fired for not meeting your basic job functions, you can't even receive unemployment while you're between jobs. So it's really important you sign your review, even if it's a negative one. It's just an acknowledgement that you've read the review. Again, if you get a really unfair performance review, it might be time to reconsider the company. Is this really where you want to be? Right? Again, if the review is not really problematic, so one review is probably not really a big deal, but if you get multiple reviews like this that are unfair and overly negative, they're probably actually thwarting your growth. In the end, this isn't really a company that you can move forward in. So that might mean that it's time to kind of start at the beginning of this course with networking, interviewing, putting your resume out there so you can find a new company where you can grow and you're viewed more fairly and respectfully. There are legal options technically available for receiving unfair reviews or receiving biased treatment, but honestly, I don't recommend them because if you move forward with legal options, it also kind of serves as a turnoff to future employers because they're not sure if you're just overly legal happy, and so you might be suing them as well in the future as well. So it makes future employers a little less likely to hire you as well. It's usually best to be as positive and calm as possible and start moving towards a career in a new field. So again, an unfair performance review, it's very painful, but the more calm and collected you can handle it, the better off you'll be in the long term, and the more you can move forward in your career, either in that company or in a new company in positive ways.